So let's begin with our esteemed guest presenter, John Gard. John Gard was appointed Chief Deputy Attorney General by Attorney General Ashley Moody in January 2019. Mr. Gard serves as primary legal advisor overseeing all legal divisions. Since joining the office, Mr. Gard has overseen the state of Florida's opioid litigation, including being directly involved in national negotiations involving multiple defendants. Since Purdue Pharma filed for bankruptcy, Mr. Gard has served on the bankruptcy court recognized ad hoc committee for non-federal government entities. And this has been responsible for negotiating interstate allocations, default interstate allocation, and intercreditor allocations in that case. It's all the money stuff. Prior to 2019, he was a partner at Quayles and Brady firm and law firm in Tampa and served as an assisted U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Florida as a federal prosecutor. He practiced law at Holland and Knight for 7 years and served as a federal law clerk. He holds a bachelor's degree in political science and history from the Florida State University and a Juris Doctorate from Tulane University School of Law. Please welcome me in please join me in welcoming Chief Deputy Attorney General John Gard. Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Representative Webb. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak to this group. What this group's involved in and is trying to accomplish is extremely complicated and extremely necessary given where we are with the opioid epidemic. I think when the numbers come out, we're going to be over 21 lives a day in our state dying. COVID-19 has not done us any favors. It's actually made the situation worse. And so I'm here to speak to you about a couple things, but mainly to speak to you about two settlements that have recently been reached nationally. That we're in the process of doing settlement sign-ons with local governments. And I've already spoken with many of your city attorneys and county attorneys and others about those two settlements. In addition, there are two bankruptcy cases going on involving Mallinckrodt and Purdue. And all four of those agreements / confirmation plans are going to provide some additional resources that are going to go towards opioids. I'm going to share my screen if I can figure out how to do it. All right, I think I've managed to do it now.
You did.
First I want to tell you that Florida, largely because of some of the cities and counties involved and the state has it's right now a memorandum of understanding with its cities and counties. And we've entered an allocation on how monies are going to get spent and what the monies that are going to come from these settlements and these plans are going to be utilized for. We were fairly early doing that. I think part of it was Broward County and I sit on the ad hoc committee for Purdue. That was the first case that where a deal had to be struck. And because of those discussions and because of the kind of the friendship I made with some of the folks from Broward, which is kind of, given that I'm a good, solid conservative Republican and Broward is not a Republican bastion, and we are often at odds and in litigation against each other. But on this kind of subject, we weren't, and we found we had a lot in common. And so we were able to kind of utilize the deal we struck in Purdue to propose a memorandum of understanding that's going to get money flowing, almost half the money flowing down to the kind of the local government area, especially for larger counties. For smaller counties, which I know there's some in this coalition, the money will go through your managing entity and to be utilized in your county. But we're trying to be as efficient as possible with the money monies that we get from here, because no matter what, I can assure you that the harm that the state of Florida and each city and county have suffered, along with our citizens, there's just not enough money. Even if we were to take every dollar from every one of these companies, there would not be enough money to kind of unring the bell and to unwind and undo all the harm that's been done. So we're going to have to be efficient with every dollar we get, and so that's what we've tried to do with kind of the negotiations we've had. So we struck about 45 days ago a nationwide deal with what a group of defendants that are called the distributors, which are all the three major drug distributors in the United States. I think they're responsible for something like 97% of the drugs that are distributed to pharmacies in Florida, and that's McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen. And Johnson & Johnson, whose subsidiary Janssen Pharmaceuticals, while they produced the COVID-19 vaccine for Johnson & Johnson, they also produced a number of opioids that prior to 2018 that they were selling into our communities. The total value of the two deals for Florida is $1.6 billion in change. That's my latest estimate. The distributor deal, where we're at in that is we've had a critical mass of states. We have 42 states that are currently on the deal, and we're now soliciting subdivision support. Kind of the top line number for the distributor deal is $21 billion. And that includes fees and some monies for Native American tribes and other similar groups. The settlement, excluding all those offsets and excluding fees, is $18.5 billion in change. And the state of Florida's share of that is $1.3 billion in change. This money is going to be payable over 17 and a half years. The first two payments will be April and July of next year, assuming that we get enough people on the deal. Kind of similar kind of summary for Johnson & Johnson. It's a $5 billion deal, and that's the top line number. It's made over 11 payments with about $3.7 billion being paid in the first 3 years. Once you remove kind of the same kind of offsets and get rid of the attorney's fees, it's about $4.26 billion. Florida's share is just shy of $300 million. And again, like the first deal, the first two payments, so there is front loading are going to occur in roughly April and July. The timeline that we're on, since that is a common question, is we're in the middle of the timeline. Actually, notice did not go out on September 19th. It's going to go out on Monday, I've been told, to Florida cities and counties. So the commissioners on here, your city and county attorneys should be getting the official notice. I'm also sending out a letter next week. We're rolling out a website that will have all the information about the settlement, along with the expected payments. Some of them are still estimated because there's some wiggle room on when fees come out. But we've done the best we can at estimating what the yearly payout is going to be to every city and county in the state of Florida, along with the state. The sign-on deadline is going to be January 2nd, so right before session. So as we go into session, which starts on January 11th, we'll know if we have a deal or not. That's also important because I'm set for trial against all these people on April 22nd of next year. So one way or the other, we will reach the end by next summer. Obviously, I'm hoping after spending 2 years negotiating with these folks that we reach the end through settlement. I think that gives us the certainty of payment. There are, I think, something like 3,500 lawsuits against these guys, and any one of which potentially could put them into bankruptcy, which would not be ideal. So that's kind of the timeline. I expect this thing to go effective in April. I expect, given the response we've had so far, that at least Florida is going to meet the settlement. But we'll wait and see. And I've done something like 40 presentations to cities, counties, and other groups. To the extent you have individual questions about the settlement, I'm happy to answer them. I've had sessions with city attorneys, county attorneys, individual commissioners. Obviously don't want to violate the sunshine law. Who is eligible to participate in the settlement? Obviously the state, counties, and that counties regardless of their litigation status, and then cities. If you're over 10,000, we have to get your release. If you're under 10,000 and you're litigating, we have to get your release. In the Florida deal that I've struck with the lawyers for the litigating cities and counties, we're allowing even smaller subdivisions to participate. So that is a possibility. There are some special districts in Florida that are eligible to participate. They're mainly hospital districts, and then school districts, because we have Miami Public Schools has filed a lawsuit. So that's who's eligible to participate in the deal. What happens if someone decides not to participate? Well, they can continue their litigation. The deal itself is set up to encourage the state to then take action against that subdivision. And I put here, though I don't ever really want to use this, but here's the law in the state of Florida that suggests that the Attorney General settling a case like this may have consequences to cities and counties who continue litigating. Again, we've tried very hard to do this voluntarily and consensually, and the Attorney General is committed to continuing to do that. But if there are holdouts, we will protect the whole from the individual holdout if necessary. Allocation of the monies that are coming to Florida. There is a default allocation in both agreements, and there's a default allocation that is in the Purdue and Mallinckrodt plan. That's generally outlined here on the left. On the right, there is, many of you may already be familiar with. If not, you can find it very easily. And if you can't find it very easily on the internet, if you'll just email me, I'll be glad to provide it to you. We have the Florida Plan MOU. It is similar in some ways to the default, but every city and county gets up to 15% of the monies if they join, and that money comes directly, so it's not going to stop in state funds. So you'll get a check from the settlement administrator. You won't have to wait on Tallahassee to allocate and assign a budget or any of those other things that I know Representative Webb knows all about. There's a second, a regional fund or an abatement fund. It varies over time. It starts out at 40%. Over time, it drops to 30%. We did that. So the cities and counties get access to roughly 55% of the funds early in the settlement, and then later in the settlement, it goes down to 45%. We did that after getting some input from counties that they had some needs as far as infrastructure. So we tried to give them a little bit more money on the front end so they could build out infrastructure to deal with this. And then kind of the other highlight of the plan is there's going to be an advisory council that's going to have to be created by statute. That's going to have roughly half of the membership being city and county membership. The Florida Association of Counties and the League of Cities will be responsible for coordinating who gets appointed to that. And so they will be able to advise the state and produce a report advising others on what the government should be spending their monies on as far as opioids. And this slide just shows you how over years, how the allocation changes of that regional fund. There was something that was on that previous slide called qualified subdivisions. And what we found when we were examining this in Purdue is that larger subdivisions have infrastructure and are already providing services, and smaller subdivisions for the most part weren't, and were reliant on state set up boards of health or other things to provide substance abuse services. In Florida, it was managing entities that were providing large parts of the services in the smaller, more rural counties. So in the default, the concept of qualified counties is at 400,000 individuals. We've dropped in the Florida plan that threshold to 300,000 people. It gets about another 3 counties who were providing substance abuse services. It has some other requirements in the Florida plan that are not in the default. Something that was very important to the Attorney General and to myself was that there's an actual task force that is getting input from stakeholders, not just the government entities, on what the priorities should be. That there has to be an abatement plan so that government has decided how the money should be spent and is not just kind of willy-nilly spending the money, and that they are currently providing or contracting with others to provide substance abuse services. Now, I think that's true for all the counties that are getting direct money in Florida, based on my understanding from talking to county commissioners and other things, but there's that requirement. And then the final requirement, which is something that there's a requirement that at least half of the municipalities have to enter some kind of interlocal agreement with the county about how the monies are going to get spent. Pinellas County, I think is on this call, already has an interlocal agreement that they've set up since the MOU was rolled out. They were the first to do it, and I think most of the cities in Pinellas County have agreed to how the money is going to get spent, and they're the kind of right now the star as far as that is concerned. There are other counties that are working on it. I think that this agreement is going to require a lot of collaboration between the state and the counties and the cities. And we need to get away from the kind of the politics of sometimes counties and cities do not get along. This should be an issue. If I can get along with Broward County on this issue, I kind of expect that the city of St. Petersburg and Pinellas County can get along, and evidently they can because they've entered into an agreement. So, that's my pitch for, this is an issue that everyone, no matter your politics, should be able to get behind and support and deal with. This is kind of the details on the advisory committee. Again, I expect that the legislature in this next session will set this up. They're also going to have to set up trust funds for the money to flow through. That's kind of beyond my, I'm not an appropriator, but I know that they did the same thing in tobacco. And we actually did a pretty good job until the Great Recession of utilizing that money correctly. So I expect that we'll set up a similar structure to tobacco, and the money will flow through the state coffers and out to projects and the like. And here's just a slide on kind of the payment streams. There's a settlement administrator, which there is in these two deals. The city county fund, which is a 15% payment, will go directly to them. It will not stop at Tallahassee. The abatement fund will go through a trust account and then dispersed, similar to what happened in tobacco and what happened in other things. Kind of the other highlight here is payment will be available to cities under 10,000, which is a difference from the default. And then what is in the interlocal agreement for Pinellas County is the cities have agreed that the money is going to Pinellas County, but to be utilized for specific purposes. And so the agreement's going to allow cities and counties to commingle or fund, to share monies. So, that because some of these, as you can imagine, when you're talking over 18 years and you're talking, some of these cities are fairly small, the amount of money is not a lot. But when you combine it with everyone else's, it becomes more and more. So while it was important to give everyone the option to get the money, if they want to assign it, if they want to transfer it to the county, for provision of services they can. And that's actually what happened in Pinellas County. And something that I'm actually extremely proud of is that almost all the money in the settlement, other than the attorney's fees and other things that we have to pay, is going to go to abate the opioid epidemic. In Florida, there's an extremely limited amount of money that is going to be allowed for administrative costs and things like that. And something like 95% of the money in Florida will go to abate the opioid epidemic. Nationwide, it has to be at least 85%. So we're trying to do it a little bit better than the rest of the nation. Some states, they were not able to get that accomplished, which is why it's a little bit lower. They actually were trying to move it even lower than 85%. And some of us that were negotiating resisted that. There is a document that's attached to the MOU. It's also attached to all the settlement agreements. It is 13 pages long. It contains all the approved uses. I've been told by multiple people it is every conceivable program, service imaginable for abating the opioid epidemic. It was created by the states. I got input from both the legislative side and from our executive agencies when it was being created. So did the other states involved. It's been reviewed by the Department of Health and Human Services, which has signed off on it. And it also was reviewed by some public health experts that are involved in the opioid cases. And every one of them has said it's basically the most comprehensive thing. Anything you can think of is on that list. So we've restricted the use of the money to those things. There will not be any, while this didn't happen in Florida, it happened elsewhere. There will be no golf courses built with opioid settlement money. There will be no roads or potholes filled. The money is going to go for services. It's going to go for treatment, recovery, prevention. There are some law enforcement uses that are possible for the money. There are obviously some other first responder services uses for the money. We have tried mightily to give those decisions to local governments, especially county governments. And there will be hopefully an umbrella above that of state programs. At least in my thought process is there's going to be probably some grants to fill holes, because I'm sure there are going to be some areas where there's not enough money. So with that, I know I've rushed through it because I could talk about this for an hour and a half, but I just wanted to kind of give some highlights of this. I did an hour and a half with the city and county attorneys, and I didn't think you wanted to sit through that. So with that, I'll open it up and be glad to answer any questions about the settlement to the extent I can.
Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate your overview of this. And does anyone have any questions? You can either type them in the chat, or you can raise your hand, or just take yourself off of mute to indicate that you have a question to ask. I have a very basic question. So it's either the settlement or the suit. So either the settlement moves forward by, like, you'll know that the settlement is moving forward January 2nd, or you go to trial on April 22nd. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so this is all related to if the settlement moves forward, this is what it'll look like.
Yes.
Okay.
But I expect it to. I mean, I just looked at, we have on the MOU side, which I set a deadline of September 30th, because we're rolling out this website and I wanted to be able to tell people what they're actually getting. We're at something like 80% of cities and counties by population in the state of Florida have signed on to the MOU. So that's pretty high already. And I've been told that a couple more counties that are large, namely Palm Beach, they're going to approve it in the next week. And at that point in time, I think we're going to be close to 90%.
And so and what do you need to get to in order to?
Well, I mean, obviously under the MOU, that's probably enough for us to go forward with MOU. Under the settlement, the more people that participate, the more money we get. We only maximize the amounts that the $1.6 billion if we get everyone on board. But we get a substantial amount of that at 95%. So we're in, and the money starts ratcheting up from at 75%. So we're already likely above that 75% threshold, and hopefully we'll get everyone. I mean, that's our goal is to do this voluntarily and have everyone join hands and do this.
Perfect. Mary Ann Dean, you have a question. Go
I do.
ahead.
Hi, I'm with Pinellas DOH, and I was just wondering, and I might have missed this earlier in the presentation because there was a lot of information definitely presented. When the settlement does occur, is it going to be in one lump sum, or is this something that's going to be allocated to these counties, municipalities yearly or on a schedule basis?
It's going to be a yearly amount, and the amount will probably vary over years because some of for example, the Johnson & Johnson settlement is very front loaded. And the distributor settlement is more kind of, it's about $1.1 billion a year. And so, the combination of those things together means, there'll be more money in the first years, which these counties are getting a higher percentage, and then it will taper off over time. There'll be money flowing every year for almost 2 decades.
Wow, thank you very much.
Thanks for your question, Mary Ann. Anyone else have a question? While other people are thinking of their question, is there any guarantee, having come from the legislature and knowing what we do with trusts and having seen utilization for money that's supposed to be new monies for existing services, is there any guarantee that this will be for new services instead of supplementing existing money in our budget? Is there any way to ensure that through, I don't know, MOUs and contracts moving forward or as part of the settlement? I don't know.
There isn't in the current deal. There will be, as far as the trust fund part of it, there is going to be a consent order that is going to be entered that is going to require the monies to be utilized for opioid abatement. There is not any language about supplementation, but the reality is in this area, which you may know, is, I mean, most of the money that the state has that are going for these services is like federal grant money. So, I mean, that was the reason why we didn't do that, because the federal grants are 2 or 3 years long, and then we're up to the kind of the whims of Congress on whether they continue them or not. And so the concern that we had was, what if the SOAR grant stops?
Right.
And we have that hole, which I think is be given to county health departments now. So, I mean, that's, so that's why it's not in there. But I mean, it is a concern. But as far as the trust fund part of it, there's going to be a court order, and the cities and counties are going to be able to enforce that. And the state will, I mean, not that I think that hopefully this never happens, but then the state will be able to enforce it if a city and county decides to build a golf course or whatever. So, I mean, I don't expect that to happen, because this is a serious enough problem that I think politically that would be not the smartest move, but politicians don't always make the smartest moves.
That's right. Well, and I love that there's that kind of accountability on both ends. And Rick, I see that you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, John, one of the questions I have is, and I'm new to this issue in the last year, but one thing that I've learned from the research that we've been doing is that the scope of the problem has changed so fundamentally in the last even 12-month period, from before that being a prescription problem, then moving into heroin, now moving into fentanyl, and now moving into even recreational drugs. And in that 13-page document, I'm wondering how flexible that is to adjust the target, which does seem to be ever evolving, and whether if it's, if that was drafted, say 18 months ago, it could be irrelevant today. And I'm wondering what kind of provision there might be to make adjustments. And the second question I have is just, is there any kind of, when you're putting this much money into a system, is there any requirement of data coming back to track, to make a little higher level of accountability and ability to track results of this expenditure over the years?
There is a requirement for data to come back. That's why there are some administrative fees, just like there are in SAMHSA grants. So we've tried the best we can to model it on kind of the data and the auditing and other things that are in SAMHSA grants. So if you're familiar at all with those, it's fairly robust, but it's not, I'm not saying it's perfect, but we were trying not to create a new wheel. We were trying to utilize things that counties and other in the state and other agencies do already. The list, while how it's phrased in these two agreements is, while I think the list is extensive and I don't think any of it is outdated, there was a realization that we're talking at over 18 years and that things might change. So the 13-page list is phrased as lists of examples of kinds of services. So it's not limiting, it's more of things like the following, couple hundred items. And again, it's things like treatment and recovery services and things like that. So, I mean, I think it's broad enough, and, it's part of the reason why it was made that broad. But we also did not we could have, and we chose not to cabinet to just things that are on the list. So as things evolve and change, while specific treatments may change, there's still, opioid use disorder treatment or substance abuse treatment, mental health problems that are obvious, that are typically associated with substance abuse. I mean, it's worded broad enough, I think, that it will cover anything in the future.
Excellent. And since we're talking about data, I have a quick question before we move to the commissioner who had a question about the split. Well, actually, it's too in the weeds. Commissioner, why don't you ask your question?
I was wondering if it's still going to be a 30-70% split, where 30% is going to be for recapturing expenditures and 70% is going to be current and future expenditures.
It's not phrased that way in the agreement. So, I mean, that at least in the Florida agreement, it's not been phrased that way.
I thought there was a cap on prior expenditures. We can come back to it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's supposed to be the grand majority of this is supposed to be forward looking.
Correct.
So, I'm not sure what you're looking at or what you've been told. I can talk to Pinellas's lawyers though about it, I'm sure.
Okay, so the majority are supposed to go to future expenditures, and I know it was discussed at one point. What about the recapturing of some of the previous expenditures? And I thought there was a cap on the previous expenditures because it needs to be going to future expenditures. Thank you.
Okay.
And Commissioner Fitzpatrick is the commissioner of Pasco County. And so they are right now pulling together their formalizing their opioid task force and pulling together plans, and they're doing a lot of work around this.
I apologize. I thought she was with Pinellas. I apologize.
Oh, absolutely.
And stand corrected. I can talk to Pasco's lawyers very easily too.
There you go.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. And it really is probably easier to just take yourself off and mute and start talking because it's a lot of scrolling through folks here. Okay, you mentioned small counties, and we do, the Project Opioid Tampa Bay includes Citrus, Hernando, Polk, Pasco, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Manatee, and Sarasota. And so would Citrus and how small is small, and like at
So-
what level does it go through the MA? And we do also have Linda McKinnon here on the call, and she is the head of our managing entity for all but Citrus and Hernando.
So as far as, most of the Tampa, Pasco, Pinellas, Manatee, Polk, they're all going to get, I think they're all above 300,000 folks. So they're going to get their regional share directly. There are a whole bunch, while they may not be in this meeting, the managing entity has a whole bunch of other counties that are probably on the smaller end of the spectrum. The monies will flow through the managing entity contract and to the managing entity to spend for services in those counties. That doesn't necessarily mean the money is going to be spent directly in those counties. I mean, it could be people that live in those counties kind of thing. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to build out a treatment center in you name the county. On the other two counties, which are in a different managing entity, that's how the money will flow. The money will flow to the managing entity to provide services for citizens of those counties. And so that's how it's going to work. Again, some of it is just because once you hit a certain point, the amount of money they're getting needs to be pooled. And that's the reality of it.
Absolutely. And so 300,000 population, is that demarcation, John?
Yes.
Perfect.
And that was reached largely because when you started looking at who was providing services directly or who had contracts with, I mean, some of those counties had contracts directly with their managing entity. And so they were funding additional monies for treatment and other services, either to the managing entity or other entities. That was roughly the demarcation line. And, when we came back at 400,000, I had people complaining that, well, I do the same thing that Polk County's at 450 or whatever thousand people. We're at 360. We're providing the exact same services Polk County is. Why are we being discriminated against? And it was because we were doing it on a nationwide basis versus kind of just in the state. So that was why we revised it downward and tried to capture some more.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Any other questions about distribution, about what counties can expect moving forward that would help y'all with your planning and with, kind of managing expectations within your own county? Lourdes, I see. Do you have a question? Oh, you're on mute, lady. Okay, and you don't. All right.
No, I don't. Thank you, Jennifer.
Absolutely. Laura, you have a question. Go ahead.
Hey, I was just curious. Thank you for the presentation. This is very interesting. I was just wondering, are we able to get copies of the presentation?
Sure.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, John, thank you so much for your time. I asked you to come today because so many of my counties or the counties in the Tampa Bay region were asking questions about the settlement money and about how it articulates with the lawsuit money and how they can manage expectations and plan around what's coming down the pike. And I think this was very helpful. And we're fortunate to have like the person, not just a person, but the person from the Attorney General's office coming and speaking to us, who is the most knowledgeable on this topic. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you and all of the work at the Attorney General's office related to this issue. So,
well, this has been the priority or one of the highest priorities for the Attorney General since she took office. I'm going to email to Jennifer the copy of the presentation and she can disseminate it from there. And I'm happy to come back or talk to anyone. I'm easy to find, and I spend a ton of my time still on this stuff. So I'm happy to address concerns, questions. If I don't know the answer, I will find the answer. And this is again the top priority of the office. So happy to be here and thank you for your time.